we have the one and only Connor O'Gara with us, national senior columnist. This is Saturday Down South. We're at the tail end of the regular season in college baseball right now, Connor. You got basketball activity in the portal, NBA draft coming up in a little more than, I guess, a little less than a couple months. And the college football portal also. I still have guys that are committing to here and there. So what's grabbing your attention the most at the moment?
Oh, Phil, I mean, it's ranking season. This is a time of year in which we roll out coach rankings in the SEC. I did which offenses are going to be best in the SEC, which defenses, top receivers, quarterbacks, running backs. Ranking season is a very lovely time of year in the college football calendar, and it's one that I really don't like to begin until this portal window closes, but it is officially closed, but obviously guys can still commit to different schools. So I at least feel comfortable in early May rolling out the rankings and getting those discussions started.
Hey, can I ask you about some rankings then, as far as, a lot of people around here want to know where Taylen Green ranks. And, I kind of compare him a little bit to Brady Cook. I think at his peak, Taylen Green could be a top 4 quarterback in the SEC. What are your thoughts? Where would you have Taylen Green ranked as quarterback?
Yeah, I do think that there is a certain all-SEC upside that Taylen has, and I think everybody knows kind of the issues that plagued him at times last year, just the ball security, what he's going to be able to do to improve in that area, second year in the system. And, you question kind of what the weapons are going to be surrounding him. Will he have a guy that he trusts as much as he trusted Andrew Armstrong? That's going to be the big question for him to answer. But, I do think that Taylen is somebody that I moved up slightly when I did my initial rankings back in January. I moved him from 10 to 8. Now, why I did that? Part because I think you look at some of these guys, the Nico Iamaleava exit, and certain things have adjusted that. But I think that Taylen needs to be able to show that he can do it against elite competition. You look at the fact that in the 7 games that he faced against FBS teams that finished with a winning record, he only had 4 touchdown passes. That's got to improve. As much as we could talk about his legs, and everybody loves to highlight real plays, I still can't believe that he hurdled that dude against Auburn. I mean, it's one of the more jaw-dropping moments of last season. I think you need to see what he does rolling out and making those right decisions, because obviously the potential is there. There's just very few quarterbacks in college football that look like he does at 6'6", with the athleticism that he has. It's going to be about finding the ways to best harness that while protecting the football this year.
What do you think of Arkansas's offense overall? We feel like the wide receiver room may have been potentially upgraded just overall, but then you're looking also to replacing your most productive receivers, tight ends as well. Wonder where you come in on Arkansas's offensive unit overall at the moment.
It's a wait and see offense. It really is. And look, I think the Omega Blake addition is kind of sneaky underrated. He did some really good things downfield that I think will impress people this year. And I do think that he'll have a few of those moments where if that connection is good, it's going to really pop and it'll be fun to watch. But I don't know that they have that legit all SEC upside type guy. And while I like Braylon Russell, I do think that he's somebody that you have to see what it looks like. Can he take on a 15 to 20 touch per game type role for an entire season? He's obviously got the size to be able to do it, but what's it going to look like game in, game out? And is there going to be enough help for Taylen Green? I don't know. And I don't know necessarily that you feel like Arkansas has this set-it-and-forget-it ground game that's going to elevate the floor of the offense. So to me, they don't necessarily deserve to start off as one of those top 5 offenses in the conference, though. Quarterback continuity is going to be really valued this year in the SEC. And there's, I believe now with the Nico situation, there's now 7 teams that have QB1 coordinator continuity year to year. And that's going to be important for Arkansas. And how much could that benefit them early on? That kind of remains to be seen. But it sure as heck beats the alternative of having to deal with a guy in a new system and having to deal with a new play caller coming in yet again. So I do think that Arkansas could potentially surprise teams just based on that alone.
Texas, Georgia, LSU, Connor, those are the 3 teams I have right now. They're going to make the playoff 12. I think you just brought up Tennessee. I think with that quarterback situation, I like Josh Heupel. Don't get me wrong. I just don't know if they make it. So who would be your 3 teams right now that you think make the playoff 12?
I would go with those 3, and then I'd add Alabama. I think Alabama, so much of the conversation is going to center around what they do at quarterback. Is year two more of a natural progression instead of whatever it was in the latter half of last year with Jalen Milroe? But the addition of Ryan Grubb, I think it's perhaps the most important assistant hire of anybody in the entire country. And I think that the reunion between Ryan Grubb and Kalen DeBoer is what should give Alabama fans confidence with a really unproven quarterback room. But they have studs at receiver with Ryan Williams, the best returning receiver in the SEC, Jeremy Bernard, coming back another year in that scheme, and then Isaiah Horton, a guy that they added from Miami. There's real optimism that Alabama has those playmakers on the outside. And after a year one in which they were just outside of the playoff and what felt like it should have been a floor-type year, I just think they have more ways to actually beat teams this year. And if they can do a better job taking care of the football, something that Jalen Milroe obviously struggled with in those losses, then I do think Alabama is going to be sitting there at 10-2 and going to the college football playoff.
And it's, of course, I mean, second year is. Do you look at it now of your you got to go immediately? Your first team is your first team now with the portal and everything, or do you still kind of give a coach a one-off? Because I know a lot of Alabama fans didn't want to give DeBoer a one-off, even though last year was good, but not one of the years that they expect.
No, I mean, I think that there are certain takeaways that it's fair to have. I don't like to judge year one coaches. And I said that before we had this rule wherein your roster was just open for 30 days to get picked apart. I mean, think about that. Think about if you had told someone back in 2006 or 2007 that you can have a roster that is just picked apart for 30 days because a coach obviously leaves or retires like Nick Saban does. That's what Alabama was exposed to. Now, Alabama obviously did some nice things in the portal as well, and they recruit at such an exceptionally high level. They actually had more guys coming back in what they were able to return, kind of their nucleus with Milroe, Tyler Booker, Malachi Moore. That actually gave them more stability than people probably gave them credit for. But I do think that kind of hurts your evaluation. It's still not an ideal roster of what a year one coach likes. But by year two, yeah, that's obviously when we're going to start asking these questions. It's when we're going to start to judge you a little bit more critically. And Alabama's one of those teams where if they get left out of the playoff this year, all of a sudden everybody's going, man, is Kalen DeBoer really going to be the right long-term fit? He's not going anywhere. He's not getting fired with a $60 million buyout. But those are the questions that will be asked in year two.
All right, we kind of went over who we think is going to be in the playoffs for the SEC. I got one. A&M or Ole Miss. Out of those two teams, I think both those teams and those fan bases both think that they can make it to the playoff 12 this year. Which one do you give a better shot to make it to the playoff 12?
A&M. A&M, because like I just mentioned with Arkansas, they will have that coordinator QB1 continuity. That's going to be really important. The addition of KT Concepcion, the former freshman All-American coming over from NC State, is going to be really important for their passing game. And that scheme, that ground game scheme with Colin Klein, should actually have a much better chance of succeeding if they're able to get Le'Veon Moss back and fully healthy after he tore his ACL. But the Mike Elko coach defense, and I do trust them to be able to figure that out after really they struggled immensely down the stretch. And he came off of the bowl game saying, it baffles me that we just couldn't even defend zone coverage all year. We couldn't defend in-zone coverage, and we couldn't figure out how to do those things. So I think A&M's got a favorable schedule to be able to do something like that. Now, I don't think they have playoff expectations, but a team that I think could pop, I would say A&M has a better chance of doing that than Ole Miss, who, look, I really like Austin Simmons and think he can be one of the most fun quarterbacks in all of college football, but that defense is destined for a regression after all the talent that they lost to the NFL draft. I think it's going to be a little bit more of a tough go, a little bit more of a one-dimensional team for Lane.
I guess I'd forgotten about Sharon Moore's involvement, or maybe it wasn't involvement, just that he had deleted all those text messages in the Connor Stallions sign-stealing scandal from, was that 2 years ago? And now I saw the report coming from Wetzel and Thamel that he's going to be sitting out 2 games, a self-imposed suspension, which I don't think any school has ever done more self-imposed suspensions than Michigan in the last 3 years. And that means they pick the games that he sits out instead of the conference. So looks like he'll be missing the 3rd and 4th game, which is Central Michigan and Nebraska. And I guess this puts does this put the whole thing to bed? The sign stealing, is this the last end of it?
No, because we could still have the NCAA say, well, that's not good enough. I mean, for all the power that the NCAA has lost, that's one thing that they actually still have in their favor is they can still enforce these things and say, well, no, this isn't an issue of antitrust law with college athletes and earning money. This is coaches blatantly violating rules. And the deleted text messages, while Sharon Moore denies that he had the active involvement and that his intentions were good by deleting text messages, which is what everybody says when they delete text messages, this is still going to be something that could be considered by the NCAA. And if they decide, you know what, 2 games, that's not good enough, we're going to go with 4, and this is what we think that you are guilty of doing, or you're at least not able to show that you are, able to prove this beyond reasonable doubt, then yeah, there could be more punishments coming from this. It's crazy to think, though. Top 4 assistants, top 4 coaches, I should say, from that 23 staff that won a national title, all either multi-game suspensions or show causes. That's pretty serious.
Wow.
That's really serious. For a team that won a national title, there are people, certain people in Columbus that may already be viewing that title with an asterisk. We'll wait and see if that develops, but yeah, it is just one of those bizarre things that we're still talking about 2 years from now, and I think the Sharon Moore, the suspension, whether it's over or not, we're still going to have these lingering questions about that 23 team.
Okay, last thing, and this has to do with the NCAA settlement that's supposed to be remaking college sports, and it sounds like it could be in jeopardy if the schools don't do what Judge Willikin basically demanded in order to give final approval, which was to grandfather in all of the athletes so that they don't lose their roster spot. And then they'll have their roster limits once all of these athletes that are currently grandfathered in exhaust their eligibility. The schools don't want to do that, and they put forward a proposal to do this grandfathering in on a voluntary school-by-school basis, which doesn't seem that that's within the letter of what the judge wanted. And that makes me think, Connor, that this settlement is in jeopardy, that it won't get approved. It'll go to trial, and the first sport that's going to have to deal with this is football.
Yeah, and just because the rosters are so massive, and you're talking about potentially 75% of this revenue sharing, this number, this $20.5 million is going to be going to football, and that's going to then have this trickle-down effect of, all right, what does it mean for this team? What does it mean for this team? I do support the need to figure out what this is going to look like for everyone because, as you know, Phil, you can't just all of a sudden have schools coming out saying, well, we don't have the budget to cover this sport, and you're cut, and you're cut, and you're cut. There'll be riots if that happens. I mean, talk about what a terrible look for college athletics if something like that were to happen, and all of a sudden we had these schools that are basically saying, hey, our hands are tied. We have to distribute this revenue in this exact way, and that means that we have to just cut these sports, and we don't have a plan in place to make sure that we're taking care of these athletes and grandfathering them in. This is still going to be a messy situation. I firmly believe that, but I do ultimately still think it's going to happen just because it feels like there's such a need to get this regulation. NIL will still exist, but regulation in terms of how you're financing all of this revenue that's coming in, I think we're going to get to that place. But, man, I thought this was going to be hammered out before that spring window opened, and certainly that's still not going to be the case.
It's time to head to the track as the first leg of the Triple Crown, the Kentucky Derby, is here. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your #1 source for all your Kentucky Derby info and sports betting action. With the largest selection of odds on everything from the NBA and NHL playoffs to the MLB and UFC and boxing, BetOnline has you covered for all your online wagering information. In between games, head over to the BetOnline Casino with all the top Vegas-style games, including poker and live casino. BetOnline, the game starts here.